Welcome to the Business of Engineering, the new podcast from Element 14, the world's largest online community for makers, engineers and tech professionals. In this series, we're going to be talking to entrepreneurs and business leaders about some of the challenges and opportunities involved in working in the tech sector. I'm happy to be joined today by Tom Martin, CEO and co-founder of JetSoft, Will Schaefer, Investor Relations Manager and Entrepreneur Coach at North Invest, Chris Nriapia, co-founder and marketing director at SentrySIS, and Daniel Burton, Entrepreneur Acceleration Manager at Natwest Business Accelerator. The subject of today's episode is funding and financing, where we'll be talking about all the issues related to cash flow and successfully managing an economically solvent business. So first of all, just go around the table and just introduce yourselves and your businesses in a little bit more detail.
So my name's Chris Nriapia. I'm the co-founder and marketing director at SentrySIS. SentrySIS is an online platform that allows retailers and national businesses to report crime online directly to the police. But we also assist the police with a number of efficiency-saving SaaS-based tools.
My name's Tom Martin. I'm a software engineer that founded JetSoft Limited. We work in the advanced manufacturing sector, helping manufacturers to manage and utilise their non-destructive testing data.
North Invest is a not-for-profit that is working to drive a stronger investor community here in the north of England. It's a really great place to invest and build a business, and there just needs to be a little bit more excitement about investing. We're here to build a stronger angel and early stage funding community for the North. You can tell I'm from the US. The North doesn't shout enough about its potential, and so I'm here to do that a little bit. Oh, sorry, Will Schaefer.
My name's Daniel Burton. I am an entrepreneur coach at the Natwest Business Accelerator, working with entrepreneurs and business leaders to accelerate their businesses by challenging them, their mindsets, and their business models.
So Tom and Chris, you guys have both had the experience of launching your own business, which is obviously quite an element of risk involved in that. Do you think there's a base level of personal financial security that a person should have attained before they attempt to launch their own business?
Well, for me, I worked as a software engineer for a company who built ultrasonic testing machines for 8 years. And it was my experience in that job of seeing how an opportunity to start a business. So I just did it on my own. And as a software engineer, I could just develop some stuff. But I think you need to have the security to cope with a few months worth of not earning any income. I think that's what you need, really, as a startup, and the passion to do it. And go for it and roll the dice. So yes, you need to do a bit of preliminary work, understand how you're going to maintain your lifestyle. But yeah, you need a few months worth of personal expenditure money. So yes, you need some.
I'd agree with what Tom says there. Just in addition to that, I sometimes think that position might never come in terms of being able to build up some reserve funds personally, because sometimes as being an entrepreneur, you've just got to go with it. As long as you've got a decent plan and you're starting to build a solid team around you, whether that's volunteers or members of staff or other supportive organisations, sometimes you've just got to start rather than having to build those excess funds up.
I would agree there's a certain element of planning. You should, before you just kick off and quit your job, you need to have a sense of how you're going to pay for your next meal, cover your rent or mortgage or whatever that may be. But at the same time, don't think that you can't get going. If you've got a project you're really passionate about and you know what you're doing, like Tom was saying, he could start building stuff in the evenings and that sort of thing. So it's certainly not like you need to have loads of cash saved up to go start. You know, you've got your evenings, you got your weekends, start doing that then, get some planning going, and then you'll have a sense of how much runway you need to have covered.
So what we see in the hub and in the accelerator is that a lot of the businesses are earning money before they actually leave their current employment. So as Will was saying, they work at night, they work at the weekends, and they already have tested and validated their idea before they jump wholeheartedly into working full-time in the business.
Again, Chris and Tom, were you both in kind of more traditional salaried jobs before you became entrepreneurs, or were you self-employed and quite early on in your careers?
No, I was a salaried. I was salaried for most of until I left. I left there. I didn't really do any development work till I left though, because there would have been a bit of conflict of interest. So I left there, and then actually they contracted me back in. So that's how I maintained earning an income while I was moving forward to start off with.
I think with me, I've sort of flicked between the two, and I've only gone for salaries when other businesses that I've attempted when I was much younger, for whatever reason, didn't go as successfully as what I'd hoped for them to do. I had a long career at the BBC for around 7 years, and then when I took the redundancy there, I was quite happy investing some of that money into a company, a software development company that myself and my business partner still run now, in addition to SentrySIS. But yeah, I think going back to kind of to Tom's point is that I suppose it does help if you have a salary, because I think what that also does as well, it gives you a bit of a solid grounding before you do make that plunge into entrepreneurship.
Certainly for me, the job I was doing enabled me to see an opportunity as well. So I was salaried in a workplace, and it was me travelling around and doing that job where I spotted a gap in the market for what I did. So I think it's important sometimes to have that background and knowledge of where you're going to go and what you're going to do. It certainly helps if you're working on something niche, I think.
Yeah, we see. I think last time we talked to Ethan Howard, who was obviously at a different stage where he was straight out of university, was launching his business, which is a route people often take now. And then obviously there's also people who work in salaried careers for a while. Do you think it's easier or harder from your perspective to launch a business from nothing, or to jump into it a little bit later down the line in your career?
I think when you're straight out of uni, you're used to living a fairly povo existence, so eating cereal for dinner. I know that Ethan, in his example, he works a part-time job to fund his living expenses. But as you progress through your career, you earn more and you tend to spend what you earn. So it is probably easier to launch straight into starting your own business because you're just used to living of fewer means, basically.
Yeah, that's true. And like you said, you're used to earning a certain amount of money, and you're going to not earn that again when you start. Well, not again, but you're not going to earn it straight away. So you have to be able to reduce your outgoings.
It's interesting that something that we might touch on later, but is partners and the role that they play within lives. There's a number of fascinating books around the kind of role that a partner plays in an entrepreneur's life. I mean, luckily for me, I've got a fantastic wife who's on a salary, and she knows that I'm trying to build the business, and hopefully the end goal will be where we can both retire early. But up until that point, there's a lot of kind of financial support that she's giving myself and the family in order to get us to the position of where we want to be.
And was there like a difficult transition period for you guys when you did jump from that kind of salary position to having to be self-reliant, where you were having to readjust to kind of what your living expenses were?
Well, I think it's a lot tougher because you have more sleepless nights. You're more worried about it. You're relying upon yourself to earn the income rather than doing a job, and that steady income's coming in. So it's tough, but actually there's a satisfaction in that, going through that and earning the money that you've actually had to go out there and do a job for, and you've not been relying upon something else.
I think when you secure a big deal, or you push a project on a few stages as well, it does give you a buzz of which I don't think that you would get from a salaried role, because you can actually see your hard work or your team's hard work resulting in exactly what you planned out from the start. So you do get excited by earning your own money, and as being in control of your own money and the money that flows through the business as well gives you kind of a better sense of worth, I think.
Yeah, definitely. If someone's willing to pay for your ideas, something you've come up with, something you've made, there's no satisfaction like it.
When you did launch your current startups, did you go in with a fully realised business plan, or is that something that evolved kind of gradually? I
had an idea, but it morphed quite a lot. At the early stages, it morphed a lot, down to the technologies available, for one thing, and talking to potential clients at the time and seeing what they wanted. And actually, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes a lot of startups have, is that they certainly technical guys, they'll concentrate on building a product, and then they'll think that if they build it, someone will come and buy it if it's good enough. When actually, you really need to be doing marketing and sales and talking to potential clients concurrently with the development work.
I think in addition to that, that's where experience comes in. I mean, I turned 40 this year, and it was a bit of a reflective time, because over my last, maybe 20 years, there's been different types of startup businesses that I've either ran or been involved in, some very small from the back end of my uni days, and some that have been quite big where we've had teams around us. And I think that when you go through that entrepreneur journey, you realise building the right type of team around you, and also be willing to listen to experienced people, whether they come in the shape of a mentor or somebody from a government organisation that might be giving business advice, or the accelerator program here, and be able to challenge yourself and challenge your original ideas. And you might have put years into a business plan for somebody to tell you that needs amending, and it makes sense to take their advice on board and look to tweak it and amend it if it needs to be done.
In terms of a business plan, I think you must have a plan, I think, is the first requirement, because I think if you're going into operations and eventually pursuing some form of funding, you need to have a plan, and you need to know where your flexibility points are, so that when something doesn't go as planned, you can sort of know where the fire is, if you will, and be able to transfer resources from one spot to the next. At the same time, though, I agree completely that you have to be able to be ready to pivot too with that flexibility. So famously, I think Slack started out as a gaming solution, and then they realized all of a sudden that they'd built a great means of communicating and managing communications. So recognizing you may have a vision in one sense, but you need to be doing that constant conversation and evolving the business and the idea and how you allocate resources accordingly.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between a fully realised financial plan and a business plan. I think the business plan's a lot easier to write than a financial plan, because a lot of the times you don't know when your income's going to come in.
Yeah,
you can predict stuff, but you shouldn't rely too much on your predictions in financial sense anyway.
Yeah.
I think just in addition to that is funding streams. So one of the things that funding streams in terms of income streams, one of the areas that we noticed that when we launched our product in the market, we were very vulnerable because we had a direct competitor who had a larger market share than us, and we were selling the same thing, so same product. So what we decided to do was add additional software products within our suite. So rather than our competitor being able to offer one piece of software, we were in a position to be able to offer 6, but to the same market that we was trying to sell into. So that gave us a real competitive advantage when it came to our sales strategy, which obviously ties into the finance.
And how would you say your approach to specifically funding and financing has evolved over the course of running your business?
I think just to echo what Tom said is that you have ideas that you develop a piece of software and somebody's going to come and buy it, and the reality is there's so much more elements that need to be put in place in order to even reach that stage. Even if somebody does want to buy it, their payment terms, especially if you're working with large organisations or government agencies, or for us with the police, is that those payment terms can be 60, 90, 120 days in some cases, and you've got to be aware of that and be able to filter that into your cash flow, because that could cause serious problems if you think that you're going to send an email and be paid in a few weeks when really it can be 3 months' time.
And Will and Dan, you both obviously work with a lot of startups. From that kind of financial perspective, what are some of the most common kind of problems or missteps that you kind of see when startups, specifically tech startups, kind of come your way?
I would say that the first mistake that I see is that people are really passionate about what they've built, and they don't understand the difference between a pitch to a customer and a pitch to an investor. So a pitch to the customer is all about the product and what you can provide and how much that's going to cost and the value to that customer. The pitch to the investor is very much about what makes this an economically viable business. How is their contribution financially and in other aspects, whether it's relationships, et cetera, are going to help you cross the chasm, if you will, from that point of where your cash burn is higher than your income, which all businesses, or not all, but most go through that period of, it might be 6 months, it might be 12 months, it might be 2 years, it might be more. So really articulating how does each pound or dollar bit of investment go in, and what does that get the investor? How does that move the business from point A to point B, and positioning that business in the next phase of its growth and getting to that point of economic viability or that next stage of growth.
We see that a lot of businesses come in and they think that seeking investment is the only way to fund the business, but there are many, many other forms of funding. The cheapest finance out there is sales. So just going out and selling your product. If you haven't got a product, go out and get some letters of intent from potential customers, which you can use with investors to get investment. But funding there's loans, there's debt, there's equity, there's all sorts out there, and you need to recognize that if you want to go down the investment route, it takes a lot of time, and you'll spend months doing it. We see some businesses taking up to 12 months to get investment, and it can take you away from selling and developing your product, and therefore missing the window of opportunity. So there is a time and place for all sorts of funding.
Dan was talking about sales are the easiest type of funding. I mean, I'm not sure that's necessarily true. It's still difficult. But JetSoft's a bootstrap startup, so we've not had any investment. So we just ploughed sales money back in to grow the business. It started off with me and a few £1,000, developing a product alongside doing some contract work to pay the mortgage. And then we built a product. We got a sale using a prototype. We then built the prototype properly. We then had a product we could sell to other people. That grew. We sold that all the time. Other people coming up with ideas, and we've just grown our product suite and gone from there, really. And we sell all over the world and do lots of interesting projects.
Okay. So for those who might not be aware, what is a bootstrap?
Oh, sorry. A bootstrap just means that you didn't take investment. You've just organically grown through sales, really.
And is that a conscious choice you've made to avoid investments, or is it just not a route that you've gone down yet?
Was it a conscious choice? It probably was. I think I was probably not aware of the opportunities of funding, really. I mean, I came from a salary background where I was in a steady job. I thought that if you start a business, you've got to go out and sell a product and get some money and then grow it that way. So I've always done, that's just how I did it. So it's probably lack of awareness rather than a conscious decision.
At the same time, though, it really just depends on the type of business that
you have. So
that's why software businesses are brilliant, because you can sit down and write a load of code with the right kit on your own laptop.
Yeah, if you're making a consumer product in a tough market, you're going to need investment almost certainly for sales and marketing means, if nothing else.
I would say that goes back to the financial plan. It's just know what sector of business you're getting into, so you're realistic in the sense that can you bootstrap it, and if you can, that might be the best way, because then you can self-fund and you're not having to spend time chasing investors and explaining what you're doing to investors. At the same time, though, you might want to avoid some of that pain, and it might be a lot easier to bring on the right partners too, because keep in mind, investors don't just bring cash. Frequently they bring expertise, relationships, and a whole load of other experience that might save you a lot of sleepless nights and mistakes.
You can act quicker. If you've got investment, you can act quicker. So if you're in a fast-paced market where you need to get your product out there or your service out there very quickly, bootstrapping is going to take its time to get there. So I guess an investment's better in that regard.
So if a business was at the stage where they were actively looking to court investors and they were asking you for advice on the first steps for doing that, specifically a tech startup, what advice would you kind of give to them?
I would say be very clear on three things: people, product, and process. So who you are in terms of people, you and your team, are a very key aspect of what's being invested in. People will frequently say, I'm not comfortable, I need more information on things. You really need to be prepared to sell yourself and your expertise and why you and the rest of your team are the right people to operate. Product, so whether it's a service or a physical product or a combination of such, be very clear on what it does and the problem that it's solving. Frequently you get clever people and teams, consultancies sometimes, that they develop a tool or something that is solving some problem, but in reality it either creates more problems or they've built a really clever tool that doesn't actually solve an issue in the marketplace, and so they're out there trying to sell something that isn't needed. So make sure you've got that narrative down pat and some sort of data that says that yes, there is indeed a market for this, and be able to explain what it does in a short, what is that problem that it solves. So be very clear on that. And then process, that's that plan that we're talking about in terms of financial plans, in the sense of what do you need that capital for. So don't say, I'm going to spend it on marketing. I hate it when that comes in, because that's useless. That tells me, saying what you're going to go spend on a pay-per-click advertisement. You're going to just go rock up to an agency and give pass my investment check over to some digital agency. And there are plenty of great digital agencies. I'm not trying to be negative on them, but you've got to tell me what that investment's going towards. How does that get the business from point A to point B? What does each pound of the investment get me as an investor in terms of advancing the business forward? And not just how that's going to work financially, but have phases and a timeline and a plan. And all of these things will change, because what's true about any plan or model is it's wrong inherently. But if you have an articulated understanding of how things are supposed to function, when things don't go to plan, you know sort of where and why, and you have a good sense of how you can then pivot and what that means for other aspects of the business if you do pivot.
One of the biggest challenges for any business is kind of maintaining a healthy cash flow. Tom, as a bootstrap, what challenges have you faced with that, and how have you dealt with it?
Loads of challenges. Cash flow, Chris mentioned it earlier on, but cash flow is my biggest nightmare, mainly because all my clients are 90-day payment terms, and you cannot ask, they will not change it. That's the terms that you either have the deal or you don't, and it's 90 days. So it's a real challenge for us, and you have to budget for it. You have to know that that's going to happen. The flip side of that is you know quite accurately for the next 3 months what your income's going to be, because you've invoiced them. So you know what money's coming in for the next 3 months quite well. So you can start to budget for that as well. So there is a very small silver lining. But yeah, cash flow is a real issue. And the other thing about that is a lot of the work we do is for the States. So the States, you've got to quote in dollars, and it's a fluctuating currency. Yeah. So it's a real pain. Actually, they paid me in a check, which I've never had a check. This is the first check. So they paid me in a check for quite a lot of money. And I paid it into the bank, and the bank said, okay, yeah, that's good. We're going to charge you for taking a check, and we're going to take 8 weeks to process it. So I'm now eagle-eyed on the currency exchange, because I'm waiting for that to clear. But cash flow is the biggest nightmare I face. Yeah.
Have you looked at invoice discounting?
I have, but there's a cost involved in doing
Yeah.
that, right? And I haven't needed to go down that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to agree with Tom that cash flow is an absolute nightmare. With us, the work that we do is we invoice a lot of crime partnerships that have retailers that sit within their partnership that use our software, along with obviously police constabularies, and they usually take their finance function outside of that organisation. It might be dealt with by maybe a radio company that they work with, who are geared up to send invoices out and chase money, or maybe a part of a city or town council. So you tend to find that you're invoicing one company, but you're chasing another department somewhere to try to get paid. And I just think, keeping open communication with suppliers that you have, and just kind of keep them abreast of what's going on. A lot of our outgoings each month is down to our server provision, and we have a great relationship with the company that we use, and we just keep open communication when our bills might not necessarily get paid on time, but we just keep them abreast of what's going on in terms of the money that we're chasing in.
Yeah, that's really important. Don't pay a bill. If usually, like you said, with the servers, most companies are fairly understanding, especially so if you've had a 12-month relationship with them, they're not going to be unreasonable or ridiculous, so long as, I suppose, you're not falling 12 months behind on your bill. But if you're open and honest with the companies, they're keen to maintain a relationship. And then I would say, yeah, cash flow is definitely something that when you're articulating a plan to investors, know what your cash burn rates are, and really have a sense of what those contracts payment terms are going to be realistic and upfront on that, so that there's not as many surprises, because there will inevitably be surprises. But
just to close on some of those points as well, especially for people who are looking at starting up businesses. I again am a strong believer of teams that you build around you, solicitors, accountancy people that, save receipts for things, document various processes that you might go through, because you'll be quite surprised how getting the right advice can help with R&D tax claims. And R&D tax claim is what the government is. I think it's still out now, where you can get a percentage of your PAYE contributions back into your company. So, not to digress too much, but some startup businesses might think, well, we're directors of the business, let's pay ourselves through dividends and go down that route, whereas paying themselves as an employee and going and paying what they call PAYE, that percentage that you pay for PAYE can be claimed back in R&D. So sometimes if you have got a lot of expensive developers around you, which you tend to have in software worlds, it's better to go down the PAYE route rather than the paying through dividends route.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely get, if you think you're qualified for R&D tax claims, definitely go speak to someone So I have a number of relationships with KPMG. Most R&D tax claims are also structured as a percentage of the reclaim. So it doesn't cost you anything to do that. So that's a really good route to go, because it doesn't cost you anything to do it. You want to get it right. So unless you're someone who knows the tax code quite well, chances are you probably don't want to be doing it yourself, because there could be some nasty consequences if you're not getting it right and you're not classifying things correctly. So do go speak to someone, and they will be keen to help you, because they'll just take a percentage of whatever cash back that you get, which is it's essentially free cash. So do it.
And for an SME, you're looking at about 33% of qualifying expenditure back as a tax cash. So it's massive impact. If you're a big business, it's about 11% of your qualifying spend, and there's quite a lot of things that qualifies as spend. So contractors, so it just doesn't have to be in-house development. If you've got outsourcing your development to freelancers or consultancies, and you can claim that as well. What I would say as well is the cash flow forecast for a tech startup can be quite scary, because you do have a lot of upfront development costs. So often you'll go into a very large red number, which is where investment and other funding's important. So be that grants, tax incentives, loans, but you need to know what that negative is. And if you do your forecasting well enough, it doesn't, if you know that you're going to be in the red, and and you're in line with your forecast, and it's nothing to be worried about, because you know that if your forecast is right and you're updating it regularly enough, that you will come out of that at some point. Well, if you don't, then don't be in business. But
you mentioned invoice discounting before. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that and some of the other things that you would advise to kind of startups in terms of helping us keep that cash flow secure and healthy?
First of all, it has to be for the right type of business. But so invoice discounting is essentially, so if you've invoiced someone, for £100,000, you can essentially get a certain percentage of that in cash up front if you pass it on to another company. But of course, there's a cost associated with that. You'll lose a percentage of the invoice, because they're now taking on a risk that, potentially your customer doesn't pay them, and they're on the hook for that. But increasingly, you're seeing some technology solutions that are making that cheaper and more affordable to SMEs. That would be something that was originally only for large businesses, but with technology now, they're able to see so that the risk profile is lower. So say, you're billing a major company, and they got you at a 90-day payment period because they're a big guy, and you're just so lucky to be providing them the service and to have them as a customer. But that person might be a really highly, or that company might have a great credit rating. So, and now there are solutions out there. I think where there's one startup that comes to mind, AutoPaid, based in Manchester, is developing a solution for that. And there's also Investly, is an Estonian company that's doing that as well. And it's particularly if you're a company that's dealing with physical product as well, that's also, there's an asset behind that. So that helps reduce the risk from a lender's perspective. So those invoice discounting can be a way to get some cash in the door. But there is a cost to it. But particularly in physical products and manufacturing, that can be just a good way of doing business.
Of course, we're all in the business of turning money into more money. So if you can get at it quicker and turn it into more money, then it might be advantageous.
Yeah, it might be worth the cost to you.
Yeah. In the case of manufacturing businesses, particularly early stage, if you're trying to develop a product or you develop a prototype, we're seeing more and more of these crowdsourcing, sort of incentive-based crowdsourcing websites and platforms where you can pledge money to buy a product once it's built, and only once you reach a certain number of pledges will you be able to build that product, and then everyone gets their product. So it just de-risks it for you, it de-risks it for the customer as well. So there are a multitude of funding options out there.
Yeah, crowdfunding can be a really great source for companies that are actually making physical products, especially consumer-based products. So the investor, looks at it and says that seems like a really cool gadget. I'd love to have that, and so that can be a really great way to fund that. It's a little bit harder for services, I think.
I think one of my only kind of criticisms about the crowdfunding is that you have to secure so much of what you're looking to raise. So let's say if you're wanting to raise £100,000 before they allow you onto your platform, and this varies depending on which platform you're looking at, whether it's one called Crowdcube or Seeders, or there's various different ones out there, where they want you to have a certain percentage of investment already secured. That might be as high as 30, 40, even 50% in some cases. I think it's just a recommendation rather than a piece of criteria before you're allowed onto the platform. But there is a slight issue for me, because that's the reason why you go into a crowdfunding site, is in order to get that investment in. If you're looking at £300,000, that percentage can be quite high in terms of what they want you to secure up front.
Yeah, but keep in mind though, now you have shareholders, so decisions, it's not just you and your tight team. And then also, in my experience, the valuations and some of the crowdfunding situations have frequently set valuation expectations, and made it difficult for future rounds of funding sometimes, because you'll see companies getting valued at 3-4 million, but then when they want to go for additional funding from additional pre-Series A funding, they're not getting that same valuation. And in part that's because that risk is now dispersed across how it might be thousands of people, so they can take that risk. But if it's someone writing a single check for £500,000, they're going to look at that and sometimes say, right, you're not worth 2 million yet. So that can be sometimes a difficult and hard pill to swallow.
This is what we touched on before about this pre-money valuation, because these crowdfunding sites, and this is I think they do a fantastic job, and it's no way to kind of do them down, but they just want their fee. They want to see you raise whatever your target is, and for them to take their percentage, and that's all they're bothered about, really. They're not bothered about other funding rounds that you might need to go through in a few years' time, and how their pre-money valuation, or the pre-money valuation that you've put in but they've just allowed that to happen, might hamper your investment down the line.
It's a marketplace.
Yeah,
it's what it is, and so it is going to be indifferent to you, so you need to make sure you're making the right choice for you and your business.
A bit like what I said before about doing sales and marketing in line with your development work. That is almost what you're doing. You're gauging the market. You're getting people to pre-order.
Yeah.
And then you can invest that money in actually building the product.
It can also be a great branding exercise. So I think, Brewdog has done a really great campaign via crowdfunding, and it's building up its consumer ability, so you can kind of own a percentage of Brewdog, and you have a degree of greater brand loyalty. So again, it's the right tool for some companies and the wrong tool for others.
Dan mentioned earlier that tech startups in particular tend to have quite a lot of different outgoings. You've got manufacturing, you've got R&D, you've got paying employees if you have them, you've got distribution, etc., and you've got marketing as well. So how do you guys kind of break that down into how much of your kind of monthly budget you're going to dedicate to each of those different channels that you need to be investing in?
Well, for me, firstly, the employees are the most expensive outgoing I have, and they take money every month without... it doesn't matter how much you bring in, the employees monies go out every month. And my income's quite lumpy, so you have to forecast for that. The other aspects, to be honest, I don't plan very well. I don't say, okay, I'm going to have this is my marketing budget, this is my business development budget. It's probably sole trader type attitude that you do what feels best. Yeah, which is I'm at liberty to do, because I don't have any shareholders other than myself.
I think with us is that we try to, from a marketing point of view, we try to pick out key exhibitions that we might be invited to or be able to attend throughout the year, where we know that a lot of our customers are. So predominantly where a lot of our work consists of is selling to police constabularies. So we need to be able to attend exhibitions, demonstrate our software, where we know decision makers within police constabularies are going to be. Those stands at those exhibitions can be very costly, but then you can also get a small presence at those locations in order to just get a kind of a chance of being seen. And that's kind of how we tend to treat our marketing. And I suppose the police and a lot of the users of our service, they do a lot of word of mouth. We get a lot of calls from up and down the country from different police organisations and national retailers asking for more information on our software. So we tend not to throw a lot of money at advertising and marketing, but when we do need to spend it, we try to have a bit of an annual budget that's there.
Yeah, just know what you're spending and why. So know what your KPIs are. And again, back to it's a trope on it, but with your marketing spend, if you're going to conferences, what's your KPI that you're going to get out of it so that it becomes worth your while. Not everything is sort of an Instagram branding exercise where you're just trying to get the name out there. That's not good enough, and that's a good way to put yourself in a tough cash position.
You mentioned earlier, Tom, that employees are your number one expense for your company. Is that true of you as well, Chris? What would you say is the biggest expense for your company?
Oh, without question, employees. I think that when we work in this environment where you might have developers around you, developers in this country are not cheap. You know, we're not talking about, and again, no disrespect to people that are doing these sort of jobs, but we're not talking about an administration role at maybe kind of 16, 17, 18,000 a year. You're talking about someone coming straight out of university with zero experience walking into a job at 25 grand a year. You're talking about midweight developers that are on sort of 45,000, 50,000 a year. So even with a very small team of 3 or 4 people, you still might be having a 180, 200,000 pounds booked for your salary every year. So it's difficult to sort of plan that in if you know that you've got a skill that needs fulfilling, what the cost implication of that will be as well.
Will mentioned earlier the importance of having a vision and being able to articulate that to investors to get them to buy into you and your brand and where you're going. But the same is equally true for trying to attract talent. So
absolutely,
staff is the biggest expense for most people. But if you've got a compelling vision, you may be able to attract talent at a lower price.
Yeah, and you might consider, having that sort of equity potential or ghost shares or whatever it is, incentivization scheme to do that.
What would you say was the most surprising expense of running your own business that maybe you didn't anticipate before you started?
For me, it's covering the cash flow. I know we've talked about it before, but you don't realise that you're paying to build something, and then you build it, then you ship it. You've got your order in now. You paid to build it, you ship it, and then you don't get paid for another 3 months after. It's covering that cost, I think, is for me the biggest cost that you probably wouldn't have thought of before I started.
So is it the planning or the interest payment?
It's probably the bit of...
Is it a cost of lost opportunity?
I'd say it was just cost of lost opportunity and the ability to...
because you didn't have the cash in the bank to work on the next thing yet because you had a 90-day payment cycle or whatever, so you couldn't take that contract.
Yeah, so you have tens of thousands of pounds you're owed in accounts receivable that you can't use.
Can't touch.
Yeah.
Another one we see that people seem to forget about is VAT and tax. So at the end of the day... At the end of the day, you need to pay the tax man, and that is, depending on whether you're a sole trader, that's based on your personal income. But as a business, you're looking at 20% tax, both VAT and corporation tax.
Yeah, definitely anything to do with HMRC needs to be focused on, because it really is important stuff. That what the kind of caveat to things like that is that, again, just be very open to them. If you are experiencing cash flow issues and you're using VAT to pay various stuff, if you speak to them, no, they don't want to see any business be closed down, so they can work within the parameters of what your repayments might be. I think for us, and we touched on this a little bit earlier about pivoting the business. So when we pivoted our business slightly and including a few more software products for police constabularies, what that had a knock-on effect on was our server resource. So we went from paying kind of £1,000 a month for our server all the way up to nearly £5,000 a month in order to accommodate what the requests of the police were and what our users wanted to do, which was report crime online to the police. So that was something that we didn't see. We just thought, yeah, that's fine, we can build this piece of software that you want and include it into the current portfolio of software products. But it did mean that there was a massive increase on our server provision, which we had to try to manage internally of how we absorb that cost.
Cool. What would you say some of your biggest frustrations with the current funding market are?
I think a lot of the frustrations that I've had, and I think I'd speak generally for entrepreneurs, is the government funding streams that have been out or are currently out. They're not as easy to access as what I would have liked them to have been. There seems to be a number of hoops that you have to jump through, or excess paperwork. And on top of that, I find that if you're an established business with a healthy turnover, it's obviously easier to access some of this funds than if you were a startup business. And that's been one of our frustrations, I think.
Yeah, certainly for the grant funding stuff, the bureaucracy required to fill in the paperwork is a huge undertaking just to fill in the application. that's a full-time job in itself. That is a frustration, which I think, as Chris was just saying, could be alleviated, I think.
Yeah, I think that I would just like to see easy access to funds for startups, especially tech startup businesses, where, if you have a tech startup business, they might not be turning over any healthy amounts of revenue. And I think that the funders need to read between the lines in terms of potentially what that business can do within that region in the future, rather than just looking at the hard numbers that it might be facing today.
So let's end on a nice fantasy question. So if you were to receive a no strings attached cash injection for, let's say, $500,000 or something, what would you spend that on?
We'd spend that on our server provision, we'd spend it on further development of our system, and we'd spend it on staff.
We've got some great ideas in looking at combining the data that we kind of own in this manufacturing space with other process data to understand why defective material gets through and reduce efficiencies in production, improve efficiencies in production. We have access to data, but we don't have the resources to develop those technologies. So I'd put some money into that. So I'd get some guys in to help develop that.
And Will, what would you advise somebody who got like a no strings attached, not that they ever happen, but no strings attached cash injection, what would be your first thing to say to them to spend it on?
Don't say marketing.
You won't hear me say that. No, I mean the thing is though is it depends on the business. So what's your priority and what is it that you need to achieve your next goal? I mean, you could say something that's going to generate revenue. Well, you might be a really clever bit of AI, and so you need to spend that on development, and revenue will come 12 months later. So it's just knowing what it is that you need to get the business and from its current phase to the next phase or the phase beyond that, and knowing what those priorities are and what the costs of it are at the same time, so that you're not paying attention to collecting your VAT tax, or you're not, you're forgetting to pay your rent, that type of thing. But yeah, so it's just know what your priorities are for the business and what it's going to take to achieve.
So this has been the Business of Engineering podcast in association with Element 14. You can find us at element14.com. We are the largest online community for electrical engineers, tech enthusiasts and makers, so please check us out. And for you guys, where can people find you if they want to find out more about you?
So if you click on SentrySIS.com, which is SentrySIS.com.
Yeah, take a look at our website. It's jetsoft.co.uk. Great to get any feedback.
Yeah, we're northinvest.co.uk, and you can contact us there.
So if you'd like any more information about the NatWest Entrepreneur Accelerator, jump online and Google NatWest Accelerator.
Thank you very much. Until next time. Bye, guys.
Cheers.
Bye.